CEO panics. Without a Chinese translator until a cleaner's daughter makes an amazing saving move. Mike Thompson stood in his office, admiring the glittering skyline of New York City through the glass walls that defined his high-powered existence. Stress twisted his gut as he perused the meeting agenda one last time, but all he could focus on now was the absence of a translator. His meeting with the Chinese investors was moments away, and without timely interpretation, he felt suddenly exposed. The thought of fumbling through the negotiations without proper communication sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had built his tech empire on ambition and privilege, but ambition felt trivial now. "Where are they?" he muttered, running a hand through his hair and pacing the room. The clock ticked louder and louder, mocking his misery. An unexpected nervousness settled in, causing him to flinch every time his phone vibrated. He was a man used to control, often bending the world to his will, but in this moment it felt like he was slipping through his own fingers. What happened to the translation service he had hired? Panic seeped through his thoughts, a tight grip on his chest, as he realized he might have to navigate this negotiation alone. His thoughts drifted to Rosa, his cleaning lady, who often brought her daughter Sophia to the office after school. He had never thought much about her, just a fixture in the background, the woman who kept his space immaculate. But as the tension clawed at him, he remembered hearing Sophia speak Mandarin to her mother on multiple occasions. Could she help him? It was absurd, but desperation pushed him forward. He had underestimated the woman and her daughter for too long, writing them off as just part of the office scenery. With a quick message to Rosa, he felt the minutes stretch like an eternity. If only he hadn't been so focused on the shiniest parts of his empire, he might have recognized the potential around him sooner. The world he dominated suddenly felt alien, and as he wrestled with his internal conflict, his arrogance wavered, revealing the vulnerability beneath. How had he come to this point? In a world where meritocracy was supposed to reign, what did it say about him when he realized his privilege came with severe blind spots? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The seconds ticked on. Mike felt a wave of dread wash over him. What if? Sophia didn't want to help? What if she couldn't? As the door swung open and Rosa entered, her daughter shyly following, the air grew heavy with expectation. Mike's regret swirled within him as he pushed aside thoughts of the success that had always defined him. If Sophia could help, who was he to deny the value she might bring? His body stiffened as they entered the conference room, the stakes now almost too much to bear. The investors arrived, their imposing presence filling the room with energy. Mike's heart raced, his grip tightened around the table, the glossy finish a poor distraction from the reality that he was teetering on the edge of failure. Would he let this moment slip through as he had for so many before? Would he dare to rely on the girl who cleaned up his office? Sophia glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Mike felt his insides knot. As the meeting began, his voice slipped into the rhythm of uncertainty, the hum of foreign tongues around him blending into chaos. Would he recognize the moment he needed to shift his approach? The tension mounted, reminding him that this meeting could redefine the course of his entire career. Caught in a web of doubt, he faced the truth. The strongest voices in the room were not always those he expected. And as Sophia stepped forward to interpret, he found himself grappling with the tipping scales of power and respect, the weight of his choices pushing him further into unease.
Would he embrace the reality of valuing those he once overlooked, or fall back into the comfortable grips of ambition? The looming answer dangled like a thin thread, waiting to snap. With a subtle shift in the atmosphere, Sophia took her position opposite Mike, a nervous yet determined intensity painted across her features. Though she was merely a teenage girl, the weight of the moment rested heavily on her slightly slumped shoulders. Mike observed her, the faint tremor in her hands revealing a hint of her own fear and the weight of expectation. In that instant, a surge of empathy cracked some of the icy walls he had built around his pride. "Thank you, Sophia," he whispered, almost as if conceding a point to the universe that it was okay to rely on others. He felt a strange sense of solidarity build between them, a bridge formed between the polished executive and the girl who had, until then, existed in the periphery of his vision. As the investors launched into their pitch, Mike's mind was a battleground of anxiety and grudging respect. Sophia's translations were precise, but her unsteady voice sent tremors through his resolve. He watched as she navigated the complex negotiation, her youthful authenticity contrasting sharply with the meticulously crafted corporate jargon swirling in the air. It was as if she didn't just translate words, she translated the very essence of connection. Yet with each sentence she delivered, Mike faced an urgent internal debate. His self-image battled against the reality unfolding before him. Was he truly as competent as he claimed? His past dealings had been grounded in familiarity and a sense of superiority, but he now found himself reevaluating what expertise truly meant. Did he know as much as he thought he did, or had he merely relied on a facade built upon status and privilege? The investors were losing interest, their eyes reflecting suspicion and impatience as they perceived the slow unraveling of Mike's expected dominance. Here was a pivotal moment. He could hold the reins of control or surrender them to Sophia. Was it time to lean into his vulnerability, to show them that growth could emerge from unexpected places? "Let's pause for a moment," Mike declared, surprising himself with the authority in his voice. He pivoted to the investors, who stared at him with uncertainty, then cast a glance in Sophia's direction. "I've been too focused on the bottom line and building a fortress of status, often overlooking the individuals who contribute to our success. Sophia, could you translate for me?" The room was silent as Mike spoke, words tumbling forth in a genuine moment of clarity. He was prepared to express his commitment to innovation, inclusivity, and a future built on collaboration, not dominion. Though his voice trembled slightly, the anger rising against his previous approach was palpable. He would not hide behind corporate lingo, but instead reveal the man he wanted to become, a leader who recognized everyone's value. As Sophia translated his words, Mike could sense a palpable shift in the energy of the room. The investors seemed to lean in, interest peaked. Here was a critical moment of transformation, not just for the negotiations, but for his identity. A glint of newfound confidence sparked inside him, but it was quickly overshadowed by an undercurrent of fear. What if they rejected this version of him? What if vulnerability was mistaken for weakness? Yet the clarity of purpose outweighed the fear. Sometimes the bravest move was to show one's authentic self, even amidst a storm of corporate scrutiny. The meeting continued, Sophia's translations pouring like liquid gold, revitalizing the discussion with sincerity while shifting perceptions. As the conversation flowed more fluidly, Mike realized he was not alone in these moments. He could share the weight of leadership. Could he redefine success? Could he emerge transformed and possibly more formidable than he had ever been? The culmination of new alliances began unraveling the tightly held threads of his old identity. Then a distressing thought crossed his mind. What if maintaining this new path meant confronting people in his circle who thrived on his previous ignorance? The very nature of his ambitions, the very foundation of his success, might soon turn into a battleground for personal integrity. What was a man willing to lose for the sake of evolving into a better version of himself? How far would he go to embrace the lessons of humility that surfaced unexpectedly? As Mike felt the
electric tension in the air shift yet again, he knew one thing for sure. He was standing on the precipice of change, and the way forward was fraught with risks he had never anticipated. The moment of truth was approaching, and with it, the chance to redefine who he truly was in a world demanding authenticity over authority. As the discussion continued, Mike's heart raced, a tempest of thoughts swirling in his mind. The energy in the room had shifted. Opportunity had cracked open the door of his own insecurities. In the small moments he took to breathe, he pondered how he might navigate this newfound alliance with Sophia. Was it simply an act of kindness towards another? Or was this, in fact, a recalibration of his own shattered self-image, where he no longer needed the armor of authority to validate his worth? Sophia, her youthful enthusiasm glowing brighter with each second, seemed to awaken something in him. It was more than a fleeting admiration. It was a realization that he was capable of evolving. Yet, the cold grip of self-doubt threatened to pull him back into familiar patterns, urging him to succumb to the comfortable expectations of his past. The meeting was gradually winding down, and Mike sensed the investors sharp on the edge of their seats, intrigued by this unorthodox approach. He made a mental note. This was more than a business deal. It was a representation of who he was developing into as a leader. Each question posed by the investors now didn't feel like an attack, but an opportunity to showcase collaborative potential. As investors scrolled through their charts and projections, Mike took a deliberate moment to reassess his next move. He could stick with their original proposal, presenting the same rehearsed data and conclusive figures, numbers that he had previously banked his identity upon. Or he could venture deeper, spilling forth ideas grounded in empathy, shared goals, and a vision that welcomed everyone involved. "Together, we can push boundaries," he began, his voice steadying as practical ideas flowed adjacent to his vulnerability. "By addressing our collective responsibility, we can not only meet targets but surpass them. Sophia represents the kind of innovative spirit we need, a reminder that insight can arise from unexpected voices." Sophia beamed, gaining confidence from his endorsement. As she translated, Mike studied her, captivated by the authenticity she projected, channeling it into the trust forming in the room. This is what connection felt like, real, raw, and utterly disarming. Yet, a flicker of apprehension thrummed beneath his composure. How would his colleagues react back at the office? The same people who relied on his formidable presence to navigate high-stakes situations. Would they view this change as weakness? Would they challenge his new narrative, seeking to undermine the authenticity he sought to embrace? The anticipation converted into a pressing urgency. He had to position himself before those doubtful voices began stirring. The investors were nodding, their skepticism fading. It was a moment of clarity for Mike. He was not merely selling ideas anymore. He was investing in his very essence. With each passing minute, the image of a powerful facade began to dissolve before his eyes, revealing something that felt far more genuine. But as the meeting came to a close, a prompt emergence of tension accompanied the investors' final questions. One senior investor, notorious for his cutthroat reputation, leaned forward. "Tell me, Mike, what happens when the pressure escalates, when decisions need to be made that jeopardize your new vision?" The question hung sickly in the air, exposing a vulnerability he had only just begun to embrace. Mike felt the chilling bite of sweat pooling in the small of his back. This was the exact moment he had been dreading. "Those are the moments that define us," he responded, biting back hesitation. "And those are the times we need to champion collective responsibility rather than choose an individual path." The silence that followed was palpable, thick with expectation. His words echoed, rousing both admiration and doubt. He wasn't just answering a question, he was planting a flag in the ground, staking his claim on the terrain of moral leadership amidst the corporate jungle. The meeting concluded with uncertain applause, eyes scanning his face for glimmers of confidence interlaced with fear. As the investors exited, Mike felt an amalgamation of anxiety and the sweet taste of authenticity settling within him. Could he truly maintain this path? He turned to Sophia, who had impressed him beyond measure. "You were incredible," he said, and as she smiled back, a question lingered in his mind, one that would alter everything. What if adherence to this new philosophy meant saying goodbye to the very structure that had supported and defined his life? He concluded the day knowing one thing for sure. The beauty of change was also its burden, and somewhere in the midst of it all, he might have to face the harsh truths about those who thrived on his previous ignorance. As the office sank into a quiet hum, Mike's resolve began to crystallize into a purposeful determination. But the shadows of his past loomed ever closer. The time had come to confront, and he knew that within that confrontation lay the key to his redemption. What would he choose when faced with the inevitable clash between his new ideals and entrenched loyalties? With every heartbeat, the tension mounted as he prepared himself for the next chapter of his transformation, a battle between the man he was and the leader he wished to become. The next day greeted Mike with an unsettling combination of dread and determination. He arrived at the office early, the quiet hum of machinery mingling with the echoes of last night's unsettling meeting. Each step carried the weight of yesterday's decisions, every corner of the familiar space now feeling like a battleground. He couldn't shake the tension coiling within him, a physical reminder of the leadership values he had begun to embrace. Values that were still vulnerable. As he settled into his office, reviewing the upcoming agenda, a message pinged on his screen. Sophia's face flashed, crisp with enthusiasm, urging him to meet her for a brainstorming session. Her perspective had invigorated him yesterday, but he couldn't help but wonder, would his colleagues amplify their doubts about his evolving philosophy as soon as the enthusiasm faded? He paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. What would he say to Sophia? Would his commitment to collaboration waver in the face of skeptical colleagues? Despite the urge to withdraw back to the safety of traditional leadership paradigms, he resolved to keep their meeting. This was a moment to practice the empathy he had spoken about, a chance to reinforce the new path he had charted. After a hesitant confirmation to meet, Mike found himself staring out the window, watching the sun blaze a trail across the clear morning sky. It symbolized clarity, and yet within him lingered a storm of doubt. He needed to address the core of his fears head-on. His mind drummed with an unsettling realization. Uncertainty about how his transformation would be received was overshadowed by the urgency of putting his new values to the test. Sophia arrived, her energy palpable. As they settled across the table, she dove into ideas for their upcoming pitch, her enthusiasm infectious. Mike listened, his heart racing, as she wove concepts that interlinked responsibility with innovation. The way she thought was refreshing, free from the constraints that had long shackled him. Each idea she presented unfolded layers of potential he had previously overlooked. Yet the fear housed within him murmured incessantly, questioning whether his colleagues would dismiss Sophia's ideas as childlike, unable to grasp the intricacies of the corporate world. Would they scorn his partnership with her? Combat the fresh narrative he was desperately trying to create? In that moment, Mike had to confront his internal struggle. He could either lean on the traditional approach, suppressing Sophia's potential, or he could take what he preached seriously, championing the strength of diverse voices regardless of familiarity. A surge of resolve coursed through him. "Let's rethink our approach," he suggested, watching Sophia's eyes widen in surprised delight.
We can present your ideas in a way that underlines not just our innovation, but also our collective strength as a team. Embracing every voice, including yours, is vital. We need that." Sophia nodded vigorously, affection shining through her gratitude. It felt exhilarating to validate her ideas, and in turn, Mike felt a rush of liberation, a glimpse of the leader he aspired to become. Yet the looming uncertainty remained. As they finalized their presentation, Mike couldn't shake off the feeling that those in his circle might react like wolves, circling the naive new ideas with the intent to devour. The moment they became aware of his alliance with Sophia, would it become ammunition against him? After their meeting, Mike faced a chilling silence from his colleagues. The gathering in the conference room was thick with apprehension.
And their eyes held a flicker of dissent. The unspoken could be felt. Mike sensed that he was standing at the precipice of a critical juncture. "What are we doing here, Mike?" Jack, a senior colleague, interjected. "This isn't just about us anymore. Are you prepared to back this partnership against every traditional tactic we've employed before?" The question sliced through the tension, and Mike's mind raced. The pressure to conform clashed violently with his wish to pave a new trail. He opened his mouth to reply, words bubbling beneath the surface, but hesitated. Faced with the defining moment, he couldn't dismiss the reality that the foundations of leadership were shifting beneath him. He felt the stirrings of anger, a protective instinct over his budding ideals, and yet fear hung stubbornly at the edges. Would he rise to the challenge or retreat back into the warm cocoon of unyielding authority? The answer slipped through his fingers like sand, the moment standing as both an opportunity and a daunting abyss. As Jack's questioning gaze fixed on him, Mike felt an unfamiliar clarity slicing through his confusion. It was now or never, and the path to his transformation lay in balancing vulnerability with strength. The realization settled heavily, cementing the pivotal need for bravery. Would he take the leap, or would he fall back into the embrace of old habits? The battle was far from over, and the air crackled with urgency as Mike prepared to confront the inevitable storm that awaited. A confrontation between new strategies and long-held beliefs that could either redefine him or dismantle his efforts completely. What would he choose as the stakes rose? Mike grappled with Jack's question, his heart thumping loudly against his chest as the room held its breath. The defensive instincts he had cultivated over years of corporate battles flashed to life, urging him to dismiss the new approach with a wave of uncertainty. Just as quickly, however, his newfound resolve reared up, pushing him to confront the turmoil within. "What do you mean, Jack?" Mike finally managed to voice, leaning slightly forward in his seat, attempting to assert control in the fraying tension. "You act like collaboration is too risky, but what's riskier? Clinging to outdated tactics or embracing innovation? We can't afford to ignore our own potential for growth." The murmurs that rose from the assembled team indicated a rift between apprehension and agreement. Jack's eyes narrowed as if brewing a counter-argument, but Mike cut him off. He had to seize this moment, act with conviction. This was about more than just their presentation. It was about his evolution as a leader. "Look around," he continued, his finger gesturing toward each team member. "We have untapped creativity in this room. New ideas are not some fleeting whim. They're our chance to redefine success. It's not just my partnership with Sophia, it's ours as a collective. If we lean into collaboration, we could radically change our approach, reshape the narrative entirely." He saw a flick of interest in some eyes, a glimmer of hope that perhaps there was merit in his perspective after all. Tension simmered, the air thick with lingering skepticism, but he chose to embrace it, letting it fuel his conviction rather than subduing it. "Jack,
"I respect our history and the wealth of experience you bring," he said, addressing his senior colleague directly. "But innovation often comes from the fringes, from voices we overlook. If we don't listen, we risk getting left behind." The room fell silent as Mike absorbed their expressions. Some faces softened with curiosity, while others remained entrenched in their skepticism. Internal conflict swirled within him, the fear of rejection clashing against a burgeoning sense of empowerment. This was a turning point, a defining moment that could either tilt him toward chaos or usher in a wave of transformation. Looking around, Mike felt small threads of resolve weaving through the fabric of doubt. Perhaps he could challenge the status quo. Perhaps this was the sinew of growth he sought after. "Let's take a risk together," he urged, growing bolder. "Our pitch can emphasize collaboration, showcasing all perspectives rather than sidelining them. If we aim to capture the attention of stakeholders, let's present them with fresh, audacious ideas, reflecting not just my vision or Sophia's, everyone's. We either unify as one team or fade into irrelevance." A silence stretched, thick with contemplation. Tension ebbed as he observed wary smiles, hesitant nods, and even a chuckle from a normally stoic colleague in the back. Distinct reactions emerged, not all aligned in harmony, but a shift stirred nonetheless. While relief tentatively washed over him, a weight settled heavily on his chest. Each ally gained brought a greater responsibility. The stakes seemed larger, the potential for failure more pronounced. Every step he took toward this uncharted territory left him vulnerable, stripped of the defenses he had relied upon for so long. As the meeting unfolded, Mike began to sketch out ideas on a whiteboard, engaging with feedback, sketching a path toward their collective vision. This wasn't just about his ideas or Sophia's, it was about claiming a collective identity rooted in collaboration. Each contribution, each critique sparked a burgeoning sense of community. Yet, as the session progressed, doubt resurfaced. Would they embrace the change, or would divisions fracture this fragile alliance he sought to cultivate? The answer felt tantalizingly close, yet still held a cloak of uncertainty. In that moment, even as the energy in the room crescendoed, echoing the stirring of fresh possibilities, Mike could feel the undercurrents of skepticism still threading toward decisive challenge. He stood at the edge of a precipice, the echoes of resistance tinged in every corner. With the collaborative energy pulsing, a new dilemma began to crystallize in his mind. Could he navigate this shifting dynamic while nurturing the very vulnerabilities he had previously resisted? The answer loomed ominously as Mike prepared to face the reaction from those still wary of change. Would he lead them toward a new
dawn, or would the bureaucracy and fear pull him back under? The stakes were higher than ever. Meeting over, a blend of exhilaration and apprehension swirled within Mike as he stepped out of the conference room. Moments ago, he had sparked something intangible, a flicker of hope, perhaps, but it was also mingled with an unsettling fear of what lay ahead. The tentative applause of his colleagues still echoed in his ears as he walked down the corridor, his mind racing with potential pitfalls and sparkling opportunities alike. As he settled at his desk, an avalanche of tasks awaited him. The phone buzzed incessantly, emails piled up like a mountain demanding his attention. Yet Mike's thoughts drifted back to that pivotal meeting. He had managed to crack a shell of inertia, but at what cost? The fragility of that new momentum pressed on his conscience. What would happen when the pressures of daily operations clashed with the daring changes he proposed? His fingers hesitated over the keyboard, mind spinning with questions. Jack's skepticism had stung, but it was more than just a contrasting opinion. It was a reflection of their corporate culture, one steeped in tradition and resistant to change. Every fear Jack voiced echoed louder within Mike's psyche. What if all their efforts were for nothing? What if he failed to make this new vision a reality? Underneath the desk, his foot tapped rhythmically, a sign of his restless anxiety. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. The experience of articulating a bold vision had ignited something deep within him, a flame he had tucked away for too long. This internal flicker of creativity, this voice that wanted to be heard, now soared unbound and frightfully clear. Leading from the front requires vulnerability, he whispered under his breath, echoing a lesson he had read in a leadership book months ago. The idea of exposing his own uncertainties felt significant and profoundly scary. For years, Mike had mastered the art of projecting confidence, but could this new path require him to peel away those layers? Opening his eyes, a sudden rush of urgency propelled him out of his reverie. He needed to transform this vision into action. With a decisive motion, he summoned Sophia, ready to harness their combined energies. Together, they would draft a strategy that embraced their pitches and outlined a framework for collaboration. As they began, Sophia's enthusiasm was infectious. Their collaborative brainstorming sparked innovative ideas, each one building on the last, and Mike felt the team's potential swell around them. But threading through his excitement was a current of trepidation. What if resistance emerged again? What if their efforts fell flat in front of stakeholders? His thoughts whirled, masking the undercurrent of doubt with frantic energy. The solution lies in transparency, he told Sophia, the statement tumbling out as if he were narrating a revelation. We need to address fears head-on. If they are concerned about the risks, we can showcase data, testimonials, and examples of successful collaboration from other companies. Yes, she replied, a spark igniting in her eyes. But we also have to prepare for defensiveness. Some may feel threatened by the shift. Maybe holding a workshop to flesh out fears and concerns could pave a smoother pathway for dialogue. Encouraged, Mike felt his resolve firming up. The collaborative process they were cultivating didn't just involve merging ideas. It required building a safe space for open discussion, a forum where even the most resistant minds could contribute. Yet that word, resistance, still nagged relentlessly. What would he say to Jack the next time they crossed paths? He imagined the meeting with stakeholders looming ahead, the presentation dangling in the balance, future consequences tied to their every move. As they sketched out concepts for the proposal, his earlier exhilaration began to pulse with doubt again. Would the team leap into this collective vision, or would the weight of history drag them back into the familiar? That foundational undercurrent of skepticism remained, ready to resurface at any moment. But amid the chaos, Mike knew he must harness this fear into fuel. Each moment carried the potential for discovery, the kind of self-awareness that could unlock the true power of his leadership. Suddenly, a new name flashed through his mind. We should invite a few team members who have expressed doubts to join our next discussion. Bring them in, let their voices be heard, he suggested. I think they could be key in easing concerns. Sophia raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. That could backfire if they dismiss the idea outright. But what if they don't? He countered, palpable determination igniting within him. What he didn't know was how this unexpected decision held the power to test not only their proposal, but also the very skills he needed to bolster within himself as a leader. Mike stared pensively at the sprawling notes before him. This was a turning point. Facing resistance with vulnerability? Could he pivot toward potential growth through confrontation? The time had come to face both his fears and those of his colleagues. That fear, however, was swiftly matched by a burgeoning drive to transform. Would he find an ally in rejection, or would the coming challenge stretch him further than he had ever anticipated? Mike's determination solidified as he sat in a conference room, the smell of fresh coffee mingling with the crisp air from the ventilation system. A mix of anxiety and anticipation settled in the pit of his stomach. This was it, the moment where he would confront not only the doubts of his peers, but also the specter of his own fears. As Sophia arranged the chairs to accommodate the additional team members, Mike rehearsed his approach. We need to cultivate an environment where concerns are validated, he muttered, trying to convince himself of the necessity of vulnerability. But in his mind, Jack's wary expression loomed large, a reminder of the pre-existing resistance he expected. When the door swung open, revealing the two skeptics, a hesitant silence followed their entrance. Mike forced himself to greet them warmly, but the tension was palpable. Craig, a longtime employee with a skeptical eye, and Amelia, a newer recruit but outspoken in her critiques, took their seats. It was now or never. "Thank you both for coming," Mike began, his voice steady. "I wanted to create this forum so we can openly discuss our proposal and the vision for our department's future. Your insights can help us shape something greater." He noticed Amelia's skeptical glance darting around the room, lips pressed into a thin line. The air felt thick, charged with unspoken doubts. Mike took a breath, suppressing the urge to retreat. Sophia jumped in, her voice warm and inviting. "Collaborative efforts can sometimes feel daunting, especially when change is involved. It's okay to feel apprehensive, and we'd like to hear everything that's on your minds." "Right," Craig said, slowly, crossing his arms. "But don't you think this new approach could backfire? We risk alienating the traditional clients with all these changes. They depend on stability, not an overhaul." Mike felt the familiar rush of defensive instinct rise within him. "We can't stay stagnant either," he replied, keeping his tone even. "Innovation is how we ensure our sustainability. I genuinely believe that if we share the data and successes from similar companies, we can reassure our clients." "They might think we're chasing trends rather than building solid relationships," Amelia interjected, her voice tinged with concern. "People want to know their businesses are secure." Determined to remain open, Mike reflected on her words. A divide lay stark before him, a chasm between progress and comfort. What if we present this not as a departure from tradition, but as an evolution? We can redefine our offerings based on what our clients value. That means engaging in workshops, getting real feedback. How does that sound? Amelia met his gaze, her eyes narrowing slightly as she processed his proposal. "And what happens if that feedback is overwhelmingly negative? Are we prepared for that?" Mike paused, his heartbeat echoing in his ears. Facing the worst-case scenario felt almost paralyzing, but there was freedom in his discomfort. If it's negative, that's a critical opportunity for growth. To know our weaknesses is to know where we can improve. We have to face the truth together. The discussion slowly shifted. Craig and Amelia began to share their concerns more liberatedly. Internal fears morphed into constructive dialogue. Ideas floated, some more viable than others, but each word added volumetric weight to their collaboration. Yet, beneath the surface, a deeper realization surged. Mike was not merely leading a discussion. He was uncovering a part of himself that was unafraid to stand in the vulnerability of leadership. For the first time, he felt the craggy path ahead not as a daunting obstacle, but as a territory filled with possibility. As they wrapped up, Mike glanced at the clock, his mind racing ahead. They had created a small bridge today, but
The wider landscape was still littered with uncertainties, and the impending meeting with stakeholders loomed ominously. "Let's touch base again after gathering more feedback," he said, bolstered by newfound strength. But as they stood to leave, Craig raised an eyebrow, a spark unsettling Mike's confidence. "Just remember, if we do this and it fails, it won't just be your skin in the game, it'll be the entire team's." It was a direct challenge, a reminder that success required shared risk. Standing in that space between uncertainty and ambition, Mike felt both exhilaration and fear intertwining once again. Would they succeed in building a structure strong enough to withstand pushback, or would their endeavor crash against the waves of conventional thinking? With this fresh unease pulsating through him, Mike knew one thing for certain. He must prepare for the storm ahead while forging ahead into new territory. He had no idea where the tides would lead, but the commitment to steer the ship remained unwavering. What challenges awaited him when the storm arrived? Would the team rally together or scatter under pressure? In the days that followed the meeting with Craig and Amelia, Mike immersed himself in the pulse of the office. Every interaction felt heightened, every conversation tinged with the potential for growth or disaster. He found himself analyzing not only the feedback they had received, but also the intangible shifts in team dynamics that emerged from their discussions. As confidence ebbed and flowed, Mike questioned his ability to bridge the gap between innovation and stability. But he was committed to confronting these challenges head-on. The day of the stakeholder meeting loomed, and he felt a thrum of urgency course through him. He devoured articles on change management, attempted to anticipate questions, and prepared for objections. Behind that preparation lay an uneasy feeling. How much of this was his idealism versus what truly resonated with both his team and their clients? In this self-reflective chaos, a pivotal moment arrived. During a brief break between calls, Mike wandered into the break room. It was a small yet vibrant space, filled with chatter and the aroma of brewing coffee. As he fidgeted with the coffee maker, it struck him that the team he led reflected the diversity of thoughts, experiences, and emotions shaping their potential path forward. He glanced around, noticing Helen, the company's janitor, diligently cleaning the countertops, her daughter sitting on a nearby stool absorbed in a book. "Everything okay?" Mike asked, recognizing the rare opportunity to connect. "Just keeping the place tidy," Helen replied with an easy smile, but her eyes carried the weight of unspoken stories. "Your daughter seems absorbed in that book. What is she reading?" "She loves stories about adventure and following dreams," Helen beamed, pride illuminating her voice. A sudden realization uncoiled within Mike. He could draw parallels between the narratives in those stories and the path he was on, ambitious, uncertain, yet filled with untold potential. Perhaps he didn't need to perfect everything before the meeting. Vulnerability could
Coexist with leadership, even in the face of opposition. That interaction with Helen awakened something in him. He returned to his desk invigorated, reminded that sometimes the most unexpected conversations could lead to profound insights. In the afternoons that followed, he opened the door for more informal dialogues within his team, encouraging insights from all corners, no matter how unconventional. As the stakeholder meeting approached, he decided to alter his strategy. Instead of presenting a polished pitch, he would share their journey, their struggles, successes, and the difference they hoped to make. He intended to establish a collaborative foundation where stakeholders could feel their opinions mattered, mitigating fears of change. On the day of the meeting, Mike's nerves jittered like a live wire. The conference room buzzed with energy, the stakeholders seated with varying degrees of skepticism written on their faces. He exchanged glances with Sophia, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his tone less formal than usual. "Today, I want to share not just our proposals, but the conversations we've had within the team that led us here. We're learning more about our strengths and weaknesses while embracing the risks that come with innovation." As he spoke, Mike's apprehension morphed into enthusiasm. He conveyed the dynamic discussions that had shaped their vision and illustrated the concepts with authentic anecdotes from his team's experiences. His nervousness transformed into genuine engagement. He was present, not just as their leader, but as a colleague who valued their collective input. Yet, as he glanced out into the sea of faces, an unease prickled at the back of his mind as a familiar figure entered, the audacious Jack, arms crossed and expression skeptical. When Jack finally posed a question, it was pointed. "You talk about engagement, but what if this plan fails? How will you take responsibility, and what will that mean for us?" The room shifted. Everyone felt the tension rise. It was a litmus test. Would Mike retreat or rise with transparency? "I appreciate your candor, Jack," he started, the calmness of his voice betraying the storm within. "I won't pretend everything will be flawless. If we falter, it is my responsibility, but it is also a necessity for us to learn and improve together." A beat held the room captive. Inside, Mike recognized a defining point in his journey. This was not merely about winning approval, it was a reflection of his maturation as a leader. While the outcome remained uncertain, one undeniable truth gripped him. He was evolving, navigating turbulence and embracing the complexity of shared risk. As the meeting progressed, Mike felt the weight of potential and accountability. Yet, as he walked towards the end, he realized that the real work was just beginning. The challenge of reclaiming stability while innovating loomed ahead. He left the meeting with unanswered questions echoing in his mind, aware that the real test of his growth lay in the actions that followed. What daring choices would he face? In melding innovation with accountability? Would his newfound openness inspire others to join him on this tumultuous path, or would resistance echo louder in the shadows? The days following the stakeholder meeting were charged with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. Mike could feel the shifting currents in the office, a blend of hope and skepticism coursing through his team. He had shared their journey, but the aftermath had left him with more questions than answers. The challenge wasn't just to innovate, it was to solidify a culture that embraced accountability and transparency. In the days that followed, Mike found himself becoming more attuned to his team's sentiments. His previous hesitance to address issues openly began to dissipate. He noticed that the once familiar conversations about projects were now intertwined with deeper dialogues about concern and commitment. One afternoon, during a town hall meeting, he sensed the tremors of unease among his colleagues when another project faced delays. Instead of glossing over it, he seized the moment. "Let's discuss what's not working," he encouraged, drawing on his recent experiences. "What can we learn from these setbacks?" The response was gradual. The team slowly began to share their frustrations, nuances about miscommunication, and the reluctance to admit when they were struggling. Each vulnerability shared became a stepping stone, reaffirming Mike's belief that every story mattered. Amidst this newfound openness, however, a specter of doubt managed to creep back in. A few days later, at the weekly strategy session, Sophia shared a troubling report on market trends. "If we continue with the current approach, we'll fall behind," she stated bluntly. The room went silent, a palpable shift filling the air. Their safety net of innovation felt more like a fragile web facing a looming storm. Mike tightened his jaw, reflecting on the stakes. If they were to pivot, it needed to be soon. He couldn't drown in fear, just as he couldn't allow his team to detach from the reality of their situation. He decided transparency would be his guiding principle. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Sophia. We need to tackle this head-on," he replied, his voice steady despite the churn inside. "What are our options to adapt?" As the team brainstormed, it became clear through their discussions that while they were striving to change, they were still holding on to familiar routines that stifled true creativity. Mike confronted a pivotal realization. He was inadvertently perpetuating a cycle of hesitation by allowing fear to seep into their discussions. They needed a radical shift, not just in strategy, but in mindset. That evening, Mike lingered in his office, dissecting their conversations and grappling with his responsibilities. Amidst the clutter of notes and proposals, a little voice echoed in his mind. Helen's daughter's passion for dreams. It struck him suddenly. They needed an infusion of youthful energy and outside perspectives to leap from the confines of conventional thinking. The next day, he set upon a plan. He announced an initiative inviting not only team members, but also external voices from diverse backgrounds, freelancers, clients, and even local students into their brainstorming sessions. It was a calculated risk, but a necessary one. Mike could already see how this could either disrupt established protocols or ignite dormant creativity. As arrangements were made, Mike felt the familiar thrill of uncertainty. This was a departure from traditional leadership, a bold opening to voices beyond the confines of their immediate network. Was he inviting chaos or creativity? As preparations ramped up, the atmosphere shifted yet again. Feedback from team members ranged from excitement to dread. Jack, with his usual skepticism, was the first to vocalize his concerns. "Bringing in outsiders, won't that just dilute our identity?" For a brief moment, Mike felt the weight of that question.
Identity versus innovation, tradition versus evolution. How could he prove that incorporating fresh perspectives could coexist with their foundational identity? Jack, this is not about replacing who we are. It's about enhancing what we can become. If we hold tight to our fears, we'll never know what we're capable of, he challenged, an eagerness simmering beneath his words. When the day finally arrived for the external brainstorming session, Mike's pulse quickened. He arranged the room to reflect openness and collaboration, a visual representation of the journey they were undertaking. Yet, as he glanced at the 50 chairs ready to fill, an overwhelming doubt nipped at the edges of his confidence. What if their identity, forged through trials, met with the chaos of external ideas and crumbled? Would he learn from this new collaboration, or would it expose the cracks in his leadership? As he took a deep breath, ready to welcome both his team and newcomers alike, Mike realized this moment was pivotal. It was a test of his resolve, a merging of boldness and vulnerability in an uncertain new chapter. Could he endure the upheaval required to lead them into uncharted waters? What awaited them on the other side of this experiment? The session began with a palpable buzz of chatter, interspersed with nervous laughter. Intertwining voices filling the room with an energy Mike had never anticipated. Indeed, the blend of familiar faces with the freshness of new perspectives set the stage for exploration. It was a powerful testament to what had been built, the trust necessary for such a vulnerable act of collaboration. As everyone settled into their seats, Mike couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He faced the assembly, the trusted team members alongside their new collaborators, and envisioned the conversation ahead. He needed to emphasize not just change, but a tangible representation of what collective innovation meant in practice. Welcome, everyone. Today isn't just about ideas. It's about discovering how we can juxtapose our experiences with yours, he began, his voice steady yet infused with fervor. The room fell silent, intent on his words. As he looked around, Mike sensed
a shifting tide. Each person, both familiar and new, held an unspoken promise of possibilities. With Sophia by his side, they facilitated the session, sparking dialogues that danced from excitement to trepidation and everything in between. Ground rules were established: listening first, speaking freely, and daring to dream. Faces lit up as ideas flowed, each person contributing nuggets of innovation, a kaleidoscope of vision that piqued the attention of the room. He engaged in an ebb and flow. When doubts or hesitation emerged, Mike swiftly acknowledged fears while steering the conversation back toward potential. Let's not shy away from discomfort. If we don't challenge our boundaries, we'll remain confined within them, he asserted. Yet, it wasn't just rhetoric. He demonstrated vulnerability when challenges arose. I wrestled with whether this idea could work too, he admitted, but the energy in this room tells me that this is not just my vision, it's ours. As the discussions deepened, individual voices shone with brilliance. Enthusiasm exploded, and collaboration transcended preconceived boundaries. Each person contributed uniquely diverse insights. Students infused youthful curiosity, and seasoned professionals offered nuanced expertise. The older counterparts began to recognize the possibilities where they had previously perceived risks. Then, the breakthrough came. A concept emerged from a quiet participant, a young woman with windswept hair and wide eyes. She suggested a mentorship program that paired team members with industry newcomers, infusing legacy with fresh, outsiders' perspectives. The room erupted into clamor. Critics were now collaborators, expressing enthusiasm rather than hostility. It became clear, this was more than an experimental session. It was a metamorphosis, an authentic reimagining of who they were as a collective. Mike felt his heart swell with satisfaction. The ideation had transformed into an empowering experience that reverberated deeper than just business metrics. By the end of the session, Mike's certainty flourished. However unpredictable the discussions had been, they generated not only innovation, but a palpable shift in their office culture, from guarded hesitance to open-minded exploration. As the participants began to depart, he sensed the warmth of a nascent community blossoming. The connection built through honest conversations lay the foundation for sustainable alliances. He had facilitated an awakening. Following the success of the brainstorming session, Mike realized the significance of this transformation within him as much as within the team. He no longer sought validation solely through accomplishments. Instead, he found meaning in the strength of vulnerability, shared ownership, and mutual respect. During the weeks that followed, he made deliberate efforts to cultivate this culture while navigating the resultant changes. Each interaction with his team was punctuated by a steady commitment to transparency and accountability. Formal meetings transformed into dynamic discussions, and even the most skeptical members found themselves engaging, contributing their valuable thoughts. The timid strains of dissent began morphing into shared visions, creating a landscape burgeoning with opportunity. That Friday afternoon, as he observed the buoyant energy in the office, Mike's eyes fell on the framed photograph hanging on the wall above his desk. A snap of him celebrating his first major victory as CEO. In that moment, contrasting the man he had once been, he saw traces of arrogance and insulated ambition, a life defined by competition rather than collaboration. Yet now he stood on firmer ground, leading not just with authority, but with profound empathy. A leader ready to champion the ideals learned through outstretching palms, extended voices, and shared journeys. With this personal acknowledgement came a wave of confidence. It wasn't about wielding power, it was about wielding influence, nurturing a shared commitment, and valuing every unique voice in the room. As Mike closed the day, he felt renewed elation. Not only had he crossed the bridge of self-doubt and resistance, he had fostered an environment that thrived on interconnectedness. He wasn't merely steering a company toward success, he was redefining leadership, embodying the true spirit of his organization. This path of growth promised evolving challenges, yet pushed Mike toward realization. Acknowledging the beauty of collaborative successes isn't just achievable, it's crucial for brilliance in business. He decided then and there to elevate the unexpected narratives within his team. His journey would not culminate here. Rather, he was embarking on a newfound path, one that continued to intertwine his growth with that of his colleagues, propelling them confidently toward an ambitious horizon. Mike Thompson knew he had finally arrived at a definitive moment of personal and professional redemption, a man transformed, ready to embrace the turbulence ahead. Now was the time to deliberately shape the future. Murmurings of doubt silenced, groundbreaking visions laid bare for all to champion. He was ready. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative conclusion.